Okay, so make sure you go to Schoology and open the Cancer Notes link, and it'll be a Google Doc. As you watch this video, make sure you fill out the notes and make sure you type the notes in a different font color before you submit it. All right, so today we're going to be taking a look at cancer. In the last few classes, we've taken a look at cells dividing. Remember, they divide for three reasons. One, to help us to grow. Another one is to help to replace damaged cells. And then the last reason why our cells have to divide is because we don't want our cells to get too large, because if they get too big, then they're going to need more nutrients and substances to work properly. And so we want our cells to have a certain size limit. Once they get to a certain size, they need to stop growing and then they need to divide. So cells will get signals to know when to divide. Now, usually cells will stop growing when they like get in contact with other cells around them, or they'll speed up the division process, maybe when there's an injury, maybe when there's damaged cells. So either way, cells are going to know when to divide or when to kind of slow down. Now, cells won't usually divide if they're unhealthy, if something's damaged, or maybe something's wrong with the environment. Now, if something is wrong, remember during interphase, which is the first part of the cell cycle, if something's wrong in interphase, the cell will try to first repair the damage or repair what's wrong. If the cell cannot repair or fix the issue, then the cell has to go through a cell death called apoptosis. Now, remember, if the cell doesn't die and it can't fix itself, then it's going to move on to the next parts of the cell cycle, which is mitosis and cytokinesis, and it's just going to divide like crazy. So, those cells that ignore the signals and they grow uncontrollably, we call them cancer cells. And when you get a bunch of cancer cells, a mass of them, they're called tumors. So tumors, just like kind of here in the picture, it's not just like one cell, it's many, many cells that are messed up and they're just dividing in an area. And they can affect the nearby cells, or in other words, a group of cells around them, which is tissues. So what happens is when they're growing, they can make growth hormones, and they'll take up all the nutrients that the cells around them would need, and they take up for themselves. So because they're taking away nutrients from healthy cells around them, it's going to affect the healthy cells around them. Now, there are two types of tumors. Malignant means they have the ability, those cancer cells or those cells can spread to different parts of the body. So instead of that bunch of cells that are growing uncontrollably, just staying in the lungs, let's say, they can actually travel through the bloodstream or travel through using different parts of the body to get to other organs, to other parts, and start growing. When it's a benign tumor, that means those cells that are growing uncontrollably, they're just in one part of the body and they're not moving to other parts of the body. So, what happens is when those cells spread to different parts of the body and form tumors, that's called metastasizing. So they're moving to different parts and affecting other organs and tissues and things like that. So how are tumors detected in the first place? Well, it's important to have these tests called screening tests to check if cells are abnormal, if they're not really working properly, maybe they're dividing abnormally fast. And it's important to get checkups all the time. So some examples of these screening tests would be, let's say, a pap smear. So for women, their cervix will be checked to see if there are any abnormal cells. Colonoscopies would be for the colon to check if there's abnormal cells that are there. And if something does look unusual, then a biopsy would be done. And a biopsy is just a test where the doctor will take a parts of those cells, or they will take pieces of that area to get the cells so that they can test it to see what's going on. Why is it abnormal? Why is it dividing a lot? What's wrong with it? So here's a slide about how normal cells and cancer cells might look like. Normal versus cancer cells, they might look differently. They might be shaped differently. So you can see here at some of the pictures here at the bottom are actual cells, and it shows how the normal cells would look like and then how abnormal cells would look like in terms of how they're arranged, their size and their shape and things like that. And that's what a doctor would be looking for. So what are the types of treatments for cancer? Now, there's lots of different types of cancer. And even if people have the same type of cancer, they might have different treatments depending on how far along, when did they detect the cancer, if it's earlier on or maybe it's later on. These types of treatment are used depending on what's going on with the person. All right, so sometimes surgery might be needed, and they would basically take that massive cells and just take it out of the body. Radiation would be just energy waves focusing on a particular area, and it's going to focus on killing those cells by basically shredding up the DNA. Because if the DNA is kind of destroyed and all shredded up, then they can't make, those cells can't make more of themselves. There's chemotherapy, which is just a collection of like chemicals and drugs that will kill not just the cancer cells, they'll actually kill any cells that are dividing very quickly. All right. So cells that divide really quickly might be like cells in your like stomach, cells in your like cells, your hair cells. So the thing about chemotherapy is it doesn't just kill the fast dividing cancer cells, it'll go ahead and destroy any cells that divide really quickly. So that's why people might have issues with like digestion and like feel nauseous and lose their hair because the cells for your hair and your gut or your stomach, they divide quickly too. So those drugs or chemicals, they will attack them too. And then there's immunotherapy, which is basically helping using the person's own immune system and their own cells to change them, to modify them, to go ahead and kill the cancer cells. All right. And here are some side effects for some of those treatments. So what causes cancer? Cancer is caused by changes, we call them mutations in the DNA. Now, sometimes those mutations are random, but there are things that are in our environment that can actually cause those mutations to occur. So if you are exposing yourself to these things, radiation, cigarettes have tons of chemicals that are not good for us. So even if you're not the one who is smoking cigarettes, if somebody around you is, you're still taking in those chemicals. Ultraviolet rays, so from the sun, if you're not protecting your skin, those ultraviolet rays can go ahead and change your DNA. X-rays, certain viruses like HPV can cause cancer, like cervical cancer. And these are called carcinogens. These are chemicals or things that can cause changes in the DNA. Also, what can happen is it can be genetic. That means like if there are people in your family that have cancer or a specific type of cancer, you're at a higher risk for getting cancer too, or that specific type because it's in your DNA. It's been that information has been passed down. So this is just an overview of cancer, cancer treatments, what causes cancer. I need you to make sure that you fill out the notes and then make sure you submit them.